Hello, dear little munchkins. Today I will be reading to you the first draft of a Hammer horror film. This one is called Vampire Virgins. Now, are we sitting comfortably? Good. Then we'll begin. Prologue. The film opens in the graveyard of Karnstein Castle at night, as per usual. From the battlements of his castle, the Count looks down as his family of vampires rise from their graves. But suddenly, two young vampire hunters, we'll call them Kurt and Johan, leapt from their hiding place and start decapitating all of the vampires the moment they rise. The Count hurries downstairs, but is scared of Johan's cross. So the men escape on horseback with the 11 heads of the vampires they've slain, while the Count surveys the aftermath and vows bloody revenge. Main titles: The Vampire Virgins. Now, it's the meeting house in the village. It's daytime in the mid-19th century. And the elders are complaining about the down payment they have to pay for the hunters to get rid of the village once and for all, the curse of the Karnsteins. See, if I was a vampire hunter, I'd go for the head vampire in charge first, cause then you get you get to see if the other vampires have ontological interior, so that helps make it less of a fight. Anyway, back to the thingy. Nothing was seen hide or hair of Johan and Kurt, so the villagers are being suspicious. But speak of the devil, they dramatically open with the sex of the vampire heads. Kurt, being a shyster, is demanding payments of 11 marks per head. 100 marks per head, because there's 11 heads. So that would be, I don't know, you can put that in the comments. I know good at maths. The villagers, being poor and destitute, refuse. And Kurt, because he's unreasonable, is now angry because they're trying to go back on the contract, even though in this case it's kind of understandable since they probably didn't expect anything to be done about the vampire problem anyway. The chief elder is now trying to calm things down, but Kurt is storming up with a more rational Johan, who is just reluctantly has to follow him, I suppose. Later in the inn, Kurt and Johan are arguing over the next course of action. Johan wants to bargain with the elders and wait for something more reasonable. But Kurt is hatched this weird drunken scheme to get his money back. Johan gets a note and goes back and talks to the chief elder, who introduces him to his wife, and no surprises here, beautiful daughter Wanda. The elder makes a cut price offer, so Kurt was right. Burn the village. They should have been eaten by vampires. It's what they deserved, clearly. Johan is still going to stay on until the evening to try and reason something out of him. But for what? Nothing's going to happen. Meanwhile, back at the inn, Kurt has hired a horse and a car and has broken into Wanda's bedroom and kidnapped her. For context, think of flowing movements of organdy chiffon. Next, he's basically kidnapping all the village beauties, basically. Johan arrives back at the inn to tell Kurt about the offer, but finding him gone, assumes he's womanizing. Well, half right. And goes to bed. Despite Kurt being half drunk, he's managed to kidnap 4 daughters and has driven them off and back to the castle. Imagine orchestra music at this point. Also, can we elaborate on how much of a stupid plan this is? It's going to go tits up within a second. I mean, did you forget that you didn't kill Count Carstein? Kurt locks up the young girls in the chapel of a ruined castle and just leaves. And as he leaves, tells them that they're for hostage until the villagers pay him what he owns. You know, like in that Rihanna music video. However, Karl Carstein is watching his every move. Inside the chapel, the girls, we'll call them Wanda, Trudy and Maria and Imogen respectively, discuss the escape plans. Wanda just climbs out into a small window, pulls herself through, drops onto the other side, onto the arms of the Count. Back at the inn, Kurt makes a subliminal message to Gerda, who's obviously a barmaid. Of course, who else has that name in these stories? That the villagers are in for a big shock in the morning and goes to bed laughing. Back at the castle, Count Carstein is whining and dining Wanda. I wonder how they managed to get human food for that. Like, obviously they don't need it. I don't know. It's just something that never made sense to me. Who's now under his spell? Meanwhile, when girls are all married, women got to stick together and all that, about what's happened. Soon Karnstein approaches the young girl, who backs off, but the hypnosis kicks in, and then he kisses her, and the kisses turns to bites, and yeah, basically, we know what happens next. As dawn breaks over the village, the girls are missing from their beds, and total panic, basically. Kurt wakes up with a steaming hangover, and has barely any recollection until a couple of moments, and then he realizes he's deep in it. But he has his pride, so he can't tell Johan. Johan goes back to see the chief elder, and Kurt takes off for the castle, intending to free the girls, but to no avail. They've already become vampires. From his secret vantage point, the Count watches him search desperately for the girls. Karnstein unders wonder to seduce the man, but not kill him, live bait and all that. So, once the idea is that once the two men are dead, the Count will plan to send the girls back to the village. Wanda meets up with Kurt, and while showing him how they escaped, tricks him into entering a hidden cell. At the meeting house, Johan is arguing with the villagers who believe the vampires up at the castle are responsible for spiriting off their daughters. Johan tells them that, oh no, they can't be. We've killed all the vampires, we swear. But offers to help. So I suppose that's consolation. That evening, some men at work in a nearby hayfield are surprised at the sight of 4 scantily clad pasties and G-strings, boys. Pasties and G-strings. Pretty girls playing at the edge of the field, and go over to investigate. The girls naturally seduce the men, but kisses turn to bites, Cue shots of Kensington gore on their necks, hay, and in the stream. And Johan, on his way to the castle, hears the screams and investigates. He finds the bloody corpses, and him being a vampire hunter, knows what those marks means, and is shocked to see Maria being a total coquette. Next course of action, obviously, is to take a cross from the pocket, and Maria backs away until she reaches a tree. and then I suppose falls over. Johan then produces a foot-long metal stake from his bag and plunges it into her heart. And her face goes from the face of pure evil to a face of peacefulness. Johan takes the body to the town only to be immediately arrested by the villagers, who now believe that they kidnapped Maria and killed her because they weren't paid. You know. Oh, this is such an idiot plot, isn't it? Loan shark vampire hunters, indeed. Soon finds out that the other girls have returned and told lies to their villagers. Next day, Johan is on trial. And his claim is that he only killed a vampire, and he was doing his job. And he didn't even know Maria was one of the missing girls. Obviously, the villagers don't believe him. The girls give their lies. Gerda says that mentions the threat from Kurt, and for Johan, it's not looking good. Unaware of the trial, somehow, Kurt has managed to reach through the window, squeeze through, and drop down into the moat. In the court, the girls claim that Kurt kidnapped them and that they managed to escape, but Johan caught Maria and killed her. The prosecutor says that the men's claim of vampire killing was all a fraud to extort money from the villagers, and that really all they must have done was just kidnap and kill innocent girls. What? So, Johan's to be strung up immediately, as Imogen and Wanda exchange knowing smiles. Later, the executioner slips a hood over Johan's head and prepares to cut his life much shorter than it should be. Meanwhile, Kurt is back at the inn and has found almost everyone at the trial, but a barmaid who's sympathetic to Johan and actually believes that the vampires aren't to be trusted. What has happened and tells him to avoid the courtyard. As the villagers would hang him too. And now the audience for the executioner pulls the lever to allow the body to drop, and the crowd gasps in horror. Then the camera pulls back and close in on a practice dummy. Haha, we tricked you. Now Johan is pushed towards the trap and the noose is tightened about his neck as the crowd looks in on greedy expectation. And then the camera zooms in again and reveals that the executioner is none other than Count Constantine. Johan's mind is racing, desperately trying to think of ways to get out of this mess. Suddenly, he thinks to himself, that he asks that if he can kiss the cross. But then one of the vampire girls isn't stupid and just tries to start a crowd shout to hurry up with the hanging. And seen in the background, Kurt rides up and listens to what's going on. The crowd roars and the chief elder nods to the executioner. He grabs the lever, tugs on it hard when an axe, thrown expertly, thuds onto the rope just as the trap door opens and Johann disappears through the drop below. Kurt spurs his horse to the gallows and retrieves his axe, which he passes to Johann so the crowd will give way to him. The angry crowd backs off and Johann once again demands the priest's cross, saying he will now prove he was saying the truth. However, the girls have mysteriously disappeared, and so has the executioner. Kurt and Johann decide to seek out the vampires at Karnstein Castle and destroy them once and for all. Any challenge, anyone in the crowd come with them. And no one except this one old man named Franz. Okay. Standard village name. Wants to come. And Franz tells the girl next to him that he will help destroy the vampires. But this girl's Imogen and he gets killed within a second. In a darkened doorway, I suppose. Back at the castle, Karnstein waits with wonder his servant Drax, as he knows the hunters will be coming soon. Franz joins the two men on their way to the castle, but he's a vampire now. Camera zooms in on the two tail marks on his head. In the village, priest on his way to church catches sight of Imogen, because he wasn't sure if Johann was telling the truth or not. So he holds up his cross, and Johann was right. Imogen was scared, and now the villagers all crowd around her, holding holy iconography and probably chanting and stuff. As the hunters approach the castle, Karnstein and Drax check for traps in the secret passage. It's Indiana Jones over here. Warily, Kurt and Johann enter the passage, closely followed by Franz. They anticipate the first trap, and they're on the second when Franz attacks Kurt from behind, but Johann springs back and drags Franz into the second trap, which releases a spike to impale his heart. Karnstein is waiting for them with Handa and Drax, as the vampire hunters just use Franz's body to get rid of traps. Okay, useful. Just before they reach the crypt, they see Trudy beckoning to them, and they are unsure whether or not she's a vampire. But she totally is. What other explanation could there be? I mean, she was with the others, wasn't she? Kurt approaches her, seeing entranced beauty, and then at the last moment she bears fangs and is staked against the wall. Johann enters the crypt and chases Karnstein, who's trying to escape down a side passage, leaving Kurt alone, and he's immediately attacked by Wanda and Jax, and in the confusion Kurt stakes Wanda, but is hit in the shoulder by Jax's axe. Johann has Karnstein cornered in the passage, but the Count just laughs at him and disappears. Okay. Hearing Kurt screams for help, he rushes towards the crypt to find Jax standing over him, ready to finish him off. Johann hurls his axe and almost decapitates Jax. Johann runs to his friend, who's fatally wounded, lifts him up and starts back up the passageway. However, in doing so, whoops, he's dropped his crucifix. Now Karnstein has watched Johann, now totally unarmed, from a side passage, and pounces basically. Not instantly, he waits his chance. Johann only has the stake in about, but is encumbered by Kurt's body, and Karnstein has the strength of several men. They fight over Kurt's body as the cat gradually gets the upper hand, forcing Kurt down to the ground. Using his last remaining strength, Johann thrusts the stake into the vampire's chest. As Karnstein reels back in agony, blood pouring from his mouth, and falls to the floor dead. It's been done. Johann scoops to pick up Kurt, but he just shakes his head. It is not the wound which he is worried about, but the vampire marks on his neck inflicted during the struggle in the grip with Wanda. And rather than become a vampire, he begs the destruction. Johann cries, and Kurt gets his wish. And then basically afterwards, the Karnstein village are mourning for their losses, but whatever, at least there's no vampires now. And Johann's been paid. And we all lived happily ever after the end.